talking about X teams. I want to start, though, with an image of what might happen if one seriously took on the idea of X teams as not just a way of organizing teams, but a way of structuring innovation within a corporate environment or any kind of organizational environment. So imagine, if you will, several large rooms in different companies filled with teams and top managers. And as presentation follows presentation, the excitement grows. These teams had truly done the extraordinary. Major project leaders at BP had created new structures and architectures to improve project management. And project management at a place like BP is in the several billions of dollars every year. Working in distributed teams with members throughout the world, these teams had come up with new ways to contract with suppliers, new ways to evaluate projects, new ways to structure joint ventures, to standardize projects, and to gain value from technology. These teams would now work with top management to implement these ideas, and that's a very important part of what we'll get to. It's not just having ideas from teams or new products or new processes, but ways of establishing and moving those ideas into ongoing work of the organization. And this process at BP has gone on year after year after year. The same process occurred at Merrill Lynch as teams came up with new products that brought debt and equity groups together as never before. At Vale, a Brazilian mining company, there were new ways of going global. And at Newscorp, IT managers were finding ways to integrate IT into business strategies. All of these companies had created what we call an infrastructure of innovation, creating new products and processes, resulting in millions and millions of dollars in new revenue while managers developed their leadership skills. How did they do this? By using X teams. So today, what I want to do is talk about the theory and practice of X teams, a form of high-performance team. The theory, just as a little bit of background, the theory comes from 25 years of studying what differentiates high and low performing teams. So basically, I and a number of colleagues and other graduate students over time, for over 25 years, have been going into corporations and trying to understand what is it that really makes a difference between teams that perform very well and teams that don't perform so well. So I'll be talking about what has come out of the large number of studies that we have done in a variety of places, including looking at hardware teams, software teams, consulting teams, top management teams, manufacturing teams, a whole host, sales teams, a whole host of different kinds of teams in different organizations. The practice side of things comes from the fact that having learned from this theory, we at the Sloan School and at the MIT Leadership Center have created over 200 teams in a variety of corporations that come for executive education and who come for creating an innovative practice within their companies. So I'm going to talk about both the theory and the practice of using X teams, not only to improve team performance, but to create teams that innovate and succeed for not just themselves, but the whole company. Before I actually talk about X teams, though, I want to talk a little bit about the conditions today that make them so necessary. And I'm going to be pulling on the work of Tom Friedman, the New York Times reporter, who has written a great book about the world being flat. Today we do live in a flat world. It's a world in which information flows freely across organizational, geographic, and cultural borders. The result is a hyperdrive environment, if you will, really fast-paced environment where innovation is the name of the game and the rules are invented on the fly, and the challenge is to always do it faster and better because, as Friedman points out, if you don't do it, someone else will. I really like Friedman talks in his book about the CEO of an American auto parts manufacturer in China who posts this saying, which I'll get to in a second, on his factory floor, in Mandarin, of course. But it says, "Every morning in Africa, a gazelle wakes up. It knows it must run faster than the fastest lion or it will be killed. Every morning a lion wakes up. It knows that it must outrun the slowest gazelle or it will starve to death. It doesn't matter whether you are a lion or a gazelle. When the sun comes up, you'd better start running." And that, in essence, is the flat world. It is one in which everybody is running. And so if you are not innovating, if you are not adapting and executing quickly, then you fall behind. And so we're living in a world in which, how do you meet that challenge? The reality of this flat world hit me really quite vividly when a number of students came to talk to me about a project, and they asked me if I could help them out with X teams to help structure their project. VDS, the Vehicle Design Summit, is a consortium, an international consortium headed by a group at MIT that is trying to develop a 200-mile-per-gallon car to be sold in India. To do that, the consortium is composed of about 23 teams working on 6 continents. It is truly an extraordinary system. I was just with them in Italy a couple of weeks ago, and they had teams there from China, from Africa, from Belgium, from Japan, from Spain, from the United States, all coming together. Each team is working on a different part of the car, the powertrain, external design, brake systems, etc., or are part of an integrating process, for example, value chain requirements. The project is run by a truly extraordinary set of people who've gotten major funding from multiple firms and who are affiliated with the best universities on the planet. When I was in Torino, Italy with them, they were also working with some of the best designers, the people who are working with BMW and Fiat, etc., in order to do car design. Why are they doing this? Because, as they point out, if GM and Toyota won't help to save the planet, they will. This is not your typical student project. So will this particular group succeed? I don't know. Come to the end of the summer in Torino, and we'll see how their second prototype comes out. But the point is not whether this particular group is successful or not. What is important is that new organizations like this are coming up all the time. These are just students, but they are prototypical of many, many new kinds of forms, organizations that are arising today, and we need to understand how they're working, because the challenge will be, how do you compete with or cooperate with or evolve toward the VDS organization? By the way, one of the students in VDS graduated and went to work for a great engineering company. He was told that in about 5 years he would get to manage a set of people, and he just didn't stay. He was there for 3 months and he came right back to VDS. He said, "I'm managing an international set of teams around the world, and they tell me I have to wait 5 years to run a team." And so the X teams and these new kinds of organizational forms are key for us to learn from, not only because we will be competing with them in the future, but also because these are the people that many organizations want to attract and retain within their organizations. And unless one gives them the kind of work that they want to do, we run the risk of having those folks not be part of the corporate environment. So just a couple other examples of the flat world. I'm sure people listening in on this know the flat world just from their own experiences, but Tom Friedman gave a great example of a small village in Colombia, an isolated village in Colombia, South America, and in that village there were people who created pottery. There was an ancient pottery, a mode of creating pottery that was inherent in their history. And that group got onto the Internet. And interestingly enough, on the Internet, they started marketing their pottery. And it was very exciting because they started selling. And so the standard of living in this particular Colombian village started to go up, and they started to do more and more work in getting more and more pottery out. Their distribution system, no problem. UPS will create a distribution system for you anywhere in the world. So they started selling more and more, and now they're actually considering doing their manufacturing in China and exporting from there. That is an example of a flat world. So the question for us is really, again, how do you... hello? I hope everybody is still listening here. How do you compete with, how do you work with companies that are like this? Another way to think about this question is, how do you make this kind of organization work in a flat world? We're in very hierarchical, many of us. I don't know what kinds of organizations all of you are in, but for many people, we are in bureaucratic organizations. And how do you make that work in a flat world is a big question. Another way to think about it in Lou Gerstner's terms is, how do you teach an elephant to dance? In today's world, part of the answer lies in something that we at the Leadership Center call distributed leadership. Leadership, that needs to be distributed across many players, both within and across organizations, up and down the hierarchy, wherever information, expertise, vision, and new ways of working together reside. So what we're looking at is a whole network of leaders who are aligned to move the organization in new directions based on market opportunities and technological breakthroughs. So the question is, how do organizations move in this direction? How do they innovate, adapt, and execute rapidly while developing networks of leaders? And one solution to this is the X team. So we're going to argue that X teams are an engine of change, a kernel of a new organization. But let me stop before I get to the X teams again. We're going to hold off just a little bit more, talk about traditional teams and X teams. But before we do that, I'm sure all of you who are listening here have been on many, many teams in the course of your careers. And so I want to start with a question that is, what is it that makes for a high-performing team? From your experiences, if you were going to start a team, what would you like to see happen on that team? What kinds of characteristics would you like to see to ensure that you had a high-performing team? So I'm going to stop for a second and ask that you go into your question and answer segment on the webinar and just throw out some ideas. What is it that, in your experience, accounts for high team performance? Okay, I don't see Here we go. Okay, so people are coming in here. Common goals are coming up. Focus, team engagement, diversity, flexibility, openness are some of the things that are coming in. Strong leadership. This is great. Strong leadership. So management support and encouragement are some of the things that are coming out. So you want everybody focused in the same direction. You want people engaged in what it is they are doing. All of that is very, very true. You want someone who's leading that endeavor. Motivation. So are people motivated? Are they trying to give as much as they can? Clear objectives. Does everybody know where they're going, what they're trying to achieve? Collaboration. So if you have a team, you obviously want people who are working together, not who are going in opposite direction. A defined scope. So what's the task here? People who know what it is they're doing and the scope of their operations. Okay. You want team members thinking outside of their responsibilities. So are they thinking not just as a representative of their area, but in a broader thing? Top leader. So someone at the top who is helping out. The right combination of people. Yeah, so do you have the right players at the table who can get along with one another, who have good chemistry between them? Leadership comes up again and again. Expertise, the right skill set. So again, do you have the right people at the table who can do the task at hand? Passion. So there's something not just about where the people are going, but how they, what their affect is, how much emotion they have. People with vision, authority to act. So do people know, again, where the future is? Aligned interests, common and aligned interests. Can you overcome the conflicts that are inevitable? Clear objectives, recognition, doing what is best for the company, well-defined strategy. Okay. I'm going to stop here. We could keep going and going and going. That was great for everybody participating. And I have to say that you are the first audience. I have to give you great credit to whom I've asked this question, and I've asked it to many audiences. You are the first audience that has brought up something about the context. Most people, when I ask this question, answer with answers that mirror what's written in the best-selling texts on Teams. It's that model that's kind of been, I call it, burnt into our brains. We have spent millions and millions, probably billions of dollars at this point, on team training that teaches us the model that focuses on a lot of what we all have just identified. The idea of clear goals and roles, team spirit, a good process for making decisions, synergy among team members, the right skills, people who get along with one another. All of that is true. All of that are key aspects of what makes a team effective. But research tells us that teams that follow this model, good teams in fact, may be doing only half, they have only half the story. And if you're only doing half of what you have to do, you can often be very, very wrong and, in fact, fail. So that's why I want to introduce the idea of X teams, because the model that we have, of teams, here we go, traditional teams, the teams that you have just identified for me primarily, and again, it's the model we all carry in our head. I've been studying teams for 25 years, and when I start focusing on my team, I also begin to think about clear roles, clear goals, good spirit, the right kinds of people at the table. That's very good. The trouble is that this team, if you're focused only on those things, fails in a flat world. Why? because these teams can build a barrier, build a wall between themselves and the external environment. I just gave a seminar, I don't know, at the beginning of June, so a month or so ago, at a conference in which A.J. Lafley, the CEO of Procter & Gamble, was speaking ahead of me, and he was talking about all the great things that he had done at P&G, because they are right now a leader in innovative practices. And what he was telling a story about when he first went to P&G, he said there were meetings and meetings and meetings and meetings and a huge amount of process. And people were all really good at working incredibly well around a conference table. And more often you would see people sitting around a conference table thinking about new ideas, thinking about what they should be doing. And he said the only problem with that is that if everybody's sitting around or standing around a conference table, then what does the outside world see? The outside world sees a part of our anatomy, which I'm not going to talk about, but your backs. And if that's what your customers see, if that's what your suppliers see, if that's what your contractors see, if you're not being externally focused on the outside world, then this can have enormous complications, create enormous complications for a team. So let me go and start talking about X teams. X teams being externally focused, as well as being attuned to their internal team processes. So this is an addition. This is the second half of the story. So let me start by, on our screen, hopefully everybody can see a team of people. In the middle is the leader of the team, a woman by the name of Tammy Savage. Tammy Savage was a manager in business strategy, and she was working at Microsoft, and her job was to come out with new ideas for Microsoft. And she said, I don't think I can come up with new software solutions because I think Microsoft is missing a core part of the market, the NetGenners, the people who are ages 13 to 24. These are the guys who are mouse trained before they're toilet trained. People who grow up on the computer, for whom instant messaging and all the kinds of software that group uses are part of their oxygen. It's part of the DNA. It's part of how they interact with the world. And she thought that Microsoft was behind the times in having software that met the needs of that particular customer group. And so she made a presentation to the top management group, including Bill Gates, and they came back and said, no, we're not going to fund you because your ideas are too vague. There's no product. I don't understand this. Go and just spend time with the customer idea. So they did not get funded. But Tammy and her group didn't stop there. They just kept going. They found a number of college students at a college where they had to do a group project, a student project, and they asked those students to live in a house and work for a couple of weeks on creating a business plan. Now, they had no interest, actually, in the plan itself. What they wanted to do is understand how those NetGenners used technology. How did they use it? What did they use it for? What did they wish they had? What was it that they were trying to do that they couldn't quite do, so that they could get a sense of what the next generation of technology could be for these NetGenners. They took pictures with them. They looked at all of the instant messaging messages that went out, all of the email that went out from these folks, and then they took all the data that they had and they brainstormed. They spent a huge amount of time saying, okay, what do these people need? How can we transform that into product ideas? What software features would be useful? And they went back with some of their video material, with some quotes from their customers, and they asked the top management group again. While Bill Gates was not totally supportive, another manager was, and they got funded. They became the 3 Degrees team. They created a product that would allow people to do things together online, like listening to music, sharing a photo album. They borrowed ideas from a lot of other companies. They coordinated with other parts of Microsoft, and even now you can see a lot of their product features coming out in parts of the Microsoft product line. So that is an example of an X team. So what I like to do is sort of look at what is it that this team did. What did the Tammy Savage and her group do over time in order to be effective? So they were obviously very much internally focused. They brainstormed, they took the feedback that they got, and they used it and created a different kind of product. But they were also extraordinarily externally active. And that's where the word X team comes from. X for externally active. X teams cross their boundaries from the very, very beginning. These connections enable teams to keep pace with shifts in the marketplace, to keep their fingers on the pulse of technologies, to understand culture, national, organizational, etc., that they are working in, and their competitors. They enable team members to learn about complex problems and find innovative solutions. So there are several things that these teams do. One of the things they do is externally link up and down the corporation. So they link upper and lower levels of the firm, so that those with knowledge of markets and potential new products can align with those forging new strategic directions and change. So one of the things that X teams do externally is to go to top management, just like Tammy Savage and her group did, and said, okay, what is the strategic direction of this firm? Either we're going to take what we do and match it to that, or we're going to actually try to shift the strategic direction that this firm is taking. In this case, Tammy was trying to get Microsoft oriented a little bit more to a particular customer segment. So she was actually trying to influence upward. This is also a way to get dialogue going. When we talk about distributed leadership, it's really important that different levels of a corporation align what it is they're doing, and that happens because X teams create that dialogue. They reach up and out. In fact, one of the things that Tammy and her team did was that if you joined the NetGen team, you had to learn something called the target. And the target was an explanation of the NetGeners, how they were different from people who had grown up without computers or people who had learned computers later in life. They had this target that described NetGeners, their needs, their aspirations, how they thought about life, how they thought about computers. And each and every new member of the NetGen team had to go present that target presentation to different parts of Microsoft to spread the word, to spread the news, to create this alignment and understanding. And that's part of how X teams operate. Another thing that X teams do is collect lots and lots of information so that they can understand as much as they can, again, about technology, markets, the customer. Tammy and her group were constantly talking to customers, asking them, if we did this, would you like this? They did lots and lots of prototyping. They also reached out to create synergies within Microsoft. So they're scouting for information. They are ambassadors to the rest of the organization, up and down the organization inside and outside the organization, looking at competitors, talking to customers. But then the third piece of what they do is that they coordinate the efforts of the company in getting done what they want to get done. So they coordinate. So in Tammy's case, they went and they talked to people who were working on video, who were working on sound, who had expertise that they could pull into the group, and so they were able to pull together resources within Microsoft to help them get their product moving. So if you will, one way to think about this is that X teams create in and of themselves an enormous number of external networks. So they are connecting to, again, folks inside the organization who have expertise, who have information, who are motivated to help, and they are also linking outside the organization to customers, to other groups that are developing technologies that they might want to import into the company. So building those external networks is a key point and a key part of what X teams do. Okay, let me go one step further, and then we'll see if there are any questions before I move on to the next segment of what I'm going to be talking about. So let me move to this, which is that X teams are flexible and adaptive. So if we think about the world being flat, we think about the fact that we have to move quickly. It's not enough to innovate. It's not enough to get all those ideas to understand the customer. You have to really move through different phases, which we'll get to in a minute, and be flexible given the demands of the moment. And the way in which you do that is partially by having people come in and out of the firm. Classic traditional views of teams are that there is one team with one set of members. X teams are much more flexible. So, for example, Tammy Savage brought in Melora, a woman who was in a researcher, early on because she really understood the mentality of NetGenners. Later, after they were finished brainstorming and had started working on the actual product development, they brought in more project managers who knew how to run a software development project and had ties to those parts of Microsoft that were key in moving that development project ahead. Later, they brought in other people who were representatives of Microsoft Messenger because that's where the product features ended up coming out of. And so they created all kinds of teams to link Messenger folks with people who had been on the NetGen team. So people there are new members and membership changes over time. Similarly, people take on different roles over time. Tammy was a key leader early on. Later, as the product moved through further stages of development, and as I said, into Microsoft Messenger, other people came to lead the team. In fact, what happened to Tammy was that one day Bill Gates came into her office and asked her to head a new group. Their task at that time was to understand the voice of the customer and integrate it with new technologies. So Tammy and her team had shifted the mindset and practices of the firm. The key from an X-team perspective is that she was able to actually leave the team, and there were other leaders, there were other people who were managing both the internal and external aspects of the team's work, such that they could continue even after Tammy and several other members left. Early on, there are a lot of people who were excited about brainstorming and figuring out what the product features would be, and those people gave way to people who really knew how to prototype and move the system through the organization. So let me stop there again for a moment or two in order to have you do a couple of different things. One is, if you are alone, maybe jot down some ideas. Are there any things that you've taken so far about going out and scouting new ideas, figuring out what customers are doing, finding out about the latest technologies, ambassadorial work to link up and down the firm, coordinating with other parts of your organization? Are there things that you might do differently in teams that you're working on that reflect this kind of model? For folks who are in groups, maybe you can talk about that for a minute or two, and if anyone during those couple of minutes has some questions for me, then again, if you could type those into the Q&A, then we'll take a break, have some Q&A, have you think about some of these ideas before moving on to the next segment of what I'm going to talk about.
Also, if you'd like to hit *1 on your telephone keypad, I can also we can open your line, and you can also ask the question as well as typing in. I don't have any people calling in right now.
Okay, and I don't see anyone asking, so why don't I just keep going then?
Okay.
And then hopefully you'll have some few questions by the time we get to the end.
And if people do hit *1 or type in, feel free to do that as things may arise, because it won't disrupt Deborah's speaking, and you'll be placed in a queue for the next break. So.
I just want to also point out that obviously teams have been going outside for a long time. So the X-Team idea is not one that is probably seen as a completely revolutionary idea. I just want to push the fact that even though a number of teams are externally focused, because you have to be somewhat in the flat world, X-Teams take an external focus from day one. It's built into their modus operandi. It's built into the way they function from the very beginning. So while most team building, while most team training focuses on internal team dynamics, when I'm going to work with a group, one of the things I'll say is, let's not set goals right away. Let's first have, for example, each and every person in this team go out and interview a key stakeholder and bring back expectations of the team, bring back their view of what the team should be doing, bring back what they wish the team would do, so that you're starting off by modeling the interaction of a team with its external context. And that is a mindset that is sometimes missing, even though there might be some external activity. How much is it planned for? How much is it organized? How much is it integrated into the internal work that the team has to do? So let me just clarify that. Okay. Let's see if we can get this to move. Okay, my slide seems to be frozen here. There we go. Okay. Teams, X-Teams, another thing that they do is that they achieve rapid execution by moving through 3 distinct phases of activity. And when we are creating X teams an organization for an innovative project, we push people through these 3 phases. We give them milestones, times in which they must finish exploration, exploitation, or exportation so that they can move on. It's really, really important. So explore, for example, is when X teams act like scouts, trying to make sense of their new terrain. They're trying to understand their task or challenge with new eyes. So, for example, when Anne Mulcahy became the CEO of Xerox, she had been in Xerox for 30 years. Nonetheless, one of the first things she did as a leader in that company was to explore why were customers leaving, why wasn't technology moving as quickly as it might, what was it that was problematic in supplier relationships and contractor relationships. So trying to understand the task and challenge with new eyes, generating as many potential insights and ideas as possible. X teams come to know their stakeholders, key market and technology trends, customer needs, the deep understanding of the issues and problems that they face in very creative ways. So one of my favorite Explore stories comes from IDEO, a product design company, and that one of the groups at IDEO had the task of designing a new emergency room so that they could create a better way of serving customer needs, the patients. And one of the ways that they did that or got ideas was to put a camera on the head of a patient, and they let it run for about 10 hours. Then they stopped, and everybody on the design team looked at the video, and what they saw was 10 hours of ceiling, 10 hours of staring at the ceiling. And that exploration, that understanding of the patient perspective changed their whole design. They put writing across the ceiling. They changed some of the ways in which patients were sitting. So if you could sit up, then there were spaces where there were books or magazines or videos, things that could keep people occupied. So this exploration is incredibly important to really, really, really understand the task and the perspective of all the different players and stakeholders that you're working with. After Explore, though, because you can't stay in the sandbox forever, and so exploration has to have a limited time in which it can occur, then one needs to move to exploit. Exploit, rather than thinking of as many possible solutions and ideas and perspectives as possible, is focusing on taking one idea into reality. So what's the one thing that this team is going to do? What are its goals, its visions? What is it going to invent? And then begin rapid prototyping to have continuous improvement of whatever the one thing is that team is going to do. So rather than getting as many, many, many different brainstorms and ideas as possible about what to do, now the focus is on creating innovative ideas about how to do the one thing that the team has decided it wants to focus itself on. So for the IDEO team, after generating hundreds and hundreds of ideas, they created a new design for the emergency room, and they started working on that. They created the design, they tested it with patients, they tested it with hospital personnel, and then they made changes and continued on that way until they had the product that they wanted. Finally, again, you can always add bells and whistles. At some point, that prototyping has to stop, and one goes to exportation, which is exporting the product or process or idea that you have to the rest of the organization or the marketplace. So it's getting it out the door, getting it out to the rest of the world. And so exportation is more around convincing others, getting your excitement to translate to other people, finding people out the organization who are going to take those ideas and make certain that they move ahead, whether it's going into manufacturing or going into marketing or being the input to another phase of a larger project. It's making sure that your ideas don't die on the vine, but that there is a pathway forward into the rest of the organization, again, or the marketplace. So, going back, how do you make this work in a flat world? You make this work by creating an overlay of X teams that work together to create an infrastructure of innovation that's a powerful engine of change. So what you're doing is creating X teams throughout your organization, and you are connecting a lot of those teams if they're working in similar areas. So the teams create a network of connections that together carry out leadership functions of making sense of the environment, creating a web of relationships to support change, establishing a vision of what is possible, and inventing new structures and processes that make that vision a reality. And that involves not only teams coming up with ideas, but linking inside and outside of the corporation, but also taking their ideas and working with top management, with people on the bottom line to make sure that there's alignment up and down the corporation. So whether it's teams at BP reshaping the way that projects are managed, teams at Merrill Lynch creating new products, it's Valet learning how to go global, teams come up with new ideas, bring those ideas to fruition, build on the ideas of teams that have gone before them, and let their teams and their ideas move out afterwards to other parts of the organization so that the ideas are not confined and the skills are not confined just to these teams, but they expand and go off into other parts of the organization. Okay, so why consider an X team? If you're sitting in an organization, why should you think about X teams? Because X teams are a little bit more complicated. You have not only people sitting around a table and working with each other, but moving around, sometimes going around the world. The VDS team, the student team, they sent huge numbers of representatives to India to understand the marketplace. They meet at different parts of the world to coordinate the work that they do. At Procter & Gamble, you've got all kinds of external networks that are getting people out and about around the world. So, for example, when a new idea was needed for Pringles, they wanted to write, some marketing group said, we want to write on Pringles. Instead of the old world, which is you put a team together and have them develop the technology to write on a potato chip, they looked around, they scouted, they sent and accessed their networks around the world. They found a baker in Italy who knew how to write on cookies. They took that technology into P&G and used it, making a much faster innovation than they would have if they had worked in the old way. So why would you consider X teams? Well, if you want to innovate, but everybody's already overworked with day-to-day activities, then X teams are a way to get people focused on innovation, focused on what's the new strategic thing that we need to be working on. 2 is when top management has a vision, but implementation lags behind. X teams is a way to get large portions of workers up and down the organization focused on implementing a new strategic idea. So at BP, the focus has been on improving the way, the efficiency with which projects are delivered. And so implementing that is something that top management doesn't necessarily know how to do. And so a huge host of project leaders are accessing lots and lots of ideas, and team after team after team comes up with a new way to make that vision a reality. 3 is local line managers know the problems, know the technology, the customers, the competition. They have ideas for change, but they feel powerless to act. And so, again, X teams link different levels of a corporation together such that you have the vision and the people who know the local conditions, and when you bring that together, the result's incredibly powerful. Teams need information and expertise that lie outside their boundaries. More and more, we live in a very complex world in which information and expertise are all over the globe. And so X teams are needed to access that information and expertise and bring it into the firm, bring it into the team. And finally, the world is rapidly changing. Problems are complex, and how do we adapt and work under these conditions with lots of different people? And the X team is a structure, it's a vehicle to make that happen, to help that happen. Finally, what are some success factors for X teams? What makes an X team successful? First is choosing members for their networks. So when we started, people said, okay, yes, well, you need people with the appropriate skills. Absolutely. They need to know how to do the job. You might even want to pick people who are somewhat compatible with each other to facilitate the internal teamwork that has to get done. But a very critical part of X teams is choosing people for their networks. If you're in pharmaceuticals, we've done a lot of work on X teams in the pharmaceutical industry, bringing people in. If you're in big pharma, the people who know the startup environment, who know the university environment, because that's where a lot of information about new molecules, new technologies lies. And so people want to bring those people into their team so that they have a ready-made network that enables them to link to key areas of expertise, information, resources. Similarly, Tammy Savage and her group wanted people who could network with other parts of Microsoft so that when they went into prototyping, they could access the resources of Microsoft. So choosing people for their networks in addition to those other variables we tend to think about. Second is make external outreach a mindset and modus operandi from day one. And I can't push this enough because some teams think they're going to be externally oriented later, but later is too late. You need to begin to get buy-in from the rest of the organization very early on, and that starts from the very beginning. Our teams have to go out and find sponsors before they're allowed to move from explore to exploit. We say, you need to find someone in this organization who thinks this is a great idea and is going to support you in its implementation, or it's not going to go anywhere. So get that person. Go do external outreach. Like P&G, there are lots of ideas out there that could be helpful to your organization, but you need to pull them in at the very beginning so they can be considered as people start a new product idea, a new process idea, a new way of doing something. So external outreach, not only in your industry, but outside your industry. If one of your ideas is, hey, we want to bring some better ways to do quality control, find people or companies that are best at quality control, not necessarily those within your own industry. So external outreach starts early, it's very broad, and you want to bring in as many new ideas as possible. X teams are often different way for teams to operate, and so providing tools can make a huge difference. Checklists, workbooks, having teams move on scouting, on coordination, giving them guidelines as to how to do this so they can stay on track and stay on target is a really important thing. Setting milestones and deliverables. Again, in a flat world, you need to innovate. That means external outreach, lots of scouting, bringing in ideas, and then brainstorming and coming up with innovative ideas. But then you need to deliver, and that means moving on from exploration to exploitation to exportation on as quick a schedule as you can. So really setting milestones and deliverables that keep people moving along that track is what enables not only innovation but also execution, two key parts of what makes a next team effective. And finally, you need top management commitment. It's great to have ideas from below, but usually you need people from the top also willing to put their time, effort, and energy into supporting and creating this infrastructure of innovation. They need to listen, they need to give time, they need to give support so that the whole structure of innovation works. So that brings us to conditions within an organization. Again, commitment from the top is key. You also need commitment from all the different levels and people willing to speak up and do what it is that they feel they want to do. Second is launch. It's really good. A lot of our teams are global. A lot of our teams that we create are dispersed around the world. And so if there's any way to bring them together at the beginning, it's really, really helpful to do that so that they can begin to get to know each other, to scope out what it is that they're going to do, and to create a plan of action before they go back to the different corners of the world. If it is a dispersed global team, they at least have this common core from which to work and a plan from which to work. A stringent structure, again, being clear about deliverables, when they're due, how to stay on target. Support and feedback, if it's at all possible, to offer some coaching to a team, to let them know when they're doing great X-team work and when they're not, and how to help them if they're not is very important. And ending and style. We've had a lot of time and energy into team building, but sometimes it's also important to put time into team ending. So celebrating what the team has done and making sure that they can present their views to others and that they have the time and resources to push their ideas and their products into the next phase post the team. And I'm going to stop there. I've spoken very, very, very quickly, so I just want to point you to a resource, which is the book, which you will all be getting. There's a lot of description and cases and theory early on. If you want to skip right to the how-to, I would go to chapters 7 and 8. Chapter 7 are checklists and tools to help a given team to be an effective X team, and it has our experience is that it's very helpful. The other piece is chapter 8, which is how to build a program of X teams, not just one, but many X teams that together create this infrastructure of innovation. And that describes some of the work that we did with BP, with Merrill Lynch, which is prototypical of what we do with a variety of different corporations. And now I will stop and leave the remaining time for as many questions as people have. And so let me stop and ask you to go to the question and answer phase, and I'll answer whatever questions I can. And otherwise, there may be some way to email and follow up if we don't get to questions or they come at you later in time. So let me also just say, in case we stop at some point, thank you so much for listening in. And so I'll await questions that anyone might have about what an X team is, about how to execute, etc.
Deborah, I did send you a question at the end of the last Q&A, so I don't know if you see it at the bottom there. Clearly the management model.
I don't see it. It's in my Q&A?
Yeah, but you have to look, I think, all the way down at the bottom.
I don't see why. I don't see that.
Okay. I can read
it. Wait. No, this is still... I still have all the answers to the first question.
Yeah, that's the... Yeah. It will be at the bottom of that.
Yeah, I don't have it.
Okay. Okay. Do you see it now?
Nope.
Okay. Here's the question. Clearly the management model must be different and supportive of such a structure. Can you, when appropriate, comment what major shifts in management are required to succeed?
Sure. So how does management have to change to succeed? I think that management, A, has to really support this, and that means, A, being able really to listen, B, being able to follow through. Now, of course, not every X-Team product is a great product. On the other hand, if nothing that the teams put forward is supported by top management, you can be sure that the second time a set of teams is created, that they're not going to be very motivated. So the top management group needs to work with X teams in order to assure the effective results that are going to come. So they need to, again, to be able to listen. They need to make time. They need to suspend some of their given ideas. Some of the best sessions I've ever been at anywhere are when X teams are reporting out on what it is that they've found out, or what it is they're suggesting that the organization has to do to move ahead. And when a manager, a top executive, stands up and says, you know what, I've been working under a particular assumption for a very long time, and enough data has been presented to me here today to say that I think that assumption is incorrect, and we had better do something, that is incredibly powerful. That is part of what helps people to move ahead and to continue to work and to continue to push boundaries and come up with new innovative ideas. There has to be some of that support. The other thing is that if you create a program and you have multiple teams that are working on new innovative ideas, then part of what some companies do is actually assign an executive to be in charge of helping on the implementation front. In the corporation, there will be someone who will say, okay, these are the ideas that have come forward. Here's how we're going to use these in a new program, or here's a new process that we're going to start that combines a lot of the ideas from these teams. And often those new initiatives use the people who have already been in X teams to continue the work. So that's another thing, is putting the resources into helping to implement what comes forward. Okay, I can see that we've now got some more questions here. So let me see if I can... okay, the question here. How do X-team-based organizations prioritize to ensure that projects are staffed for success? Good question. One of the things is not to produce or create too many X teams. You don't want too many. So what is it that the organization wants to do? Now, depending on the size of the initiative, you might have one company is starting with 3 X teams for a new initiative. Another company that we've worked with for quite a long time is doing 3 or 4 initiatives a year with about 7 X teams each. It depends on how many people you have. You don't want to create too many teams. So I guess the key is not having too many, to make sure that the ones that you have do have the right people, who have the right connections, who there is enough time for top management to pay attention to these teams and to work with them. So keeping, I would say, start small and move to get larger over time. Okay. Can you speak more about distributed leadership? I guess that is distributed leadership in the context of team structure. Who leads and what is the responsibility, accountability? So, yes, distributed leadership, the way in which this typically works is that the executives, the top levels within the corporation, will provide the umbrella in which innovation is to take place. So the folks on X teams, unless an X team is initiating and wants to start something, which is a different case, but if you've got a program starting within an organization, then top management is creating the umbrella. So, for example, we want to improve the efficiency with which projects are managed, or we want to, we already have great products, but we want to create even better products. So we want people who are focusing on the most innovative products that we can find, or we want to go global. So what are the ways, what are the processes, what is it we need to do as an organization to improve our global capacity? So they're setting the umbrella of leadership, if you will. And then they're finding people who have something to do with that kind of work, who have ideas, who have expertise, who have the drive to do something about making a difference in that domain that top management has specified. And so you bring those folks together to create X teams in arenas that they feel particularly passionate about. So most of the work that we do, teams are not assigned. They're just given the overall arena of strategic change, and then they say, look, this is what we think is problematic. We're going to work on finding a solution to this. So people begin to be empowered to come up with solutions, to pull a team together, and to figure out what is a way forward in order to move the organization. And then you get different layers working together in the same direction. I hope that answers your question. Okay, next question. Are there templates and more guidelines in the book? Yes, there are. The book has, as I said, in Chapter 7 are checklists for what do you need to do to set the team up, ideas of what the team want to discuss before they get started, and there's a checklist for each of the 3 phases: exploration, exploitation, and exportation. So what questions does the team need to answer? There's also a little bit of a framework about a guide for how a team should set itself up. You write down simple tasks, who's responsible, when do people need to report in. We have found those kinds of worksheets are incredibly important to keeping a team on target. So yes, there are templates and guides in the book, Chapter 7 for specific teams, and Chapter 8 for organizations that want to put these larger programs into their organizations. Okay, are X teams best solicited, ask for volunteers, or picked, or a mixture? We usually, well, it's probably a mixture. I mean, different organizations do it differently. If you're going into a product development organization in order to improve products, then sometimes they say, we're doing this, and so, come and join the effort. Sometimes it's a voluntary kind of thing. If you do this well, then what we have found, we have some data actually, that people who go through an X-Team experience actually have better, sharper, speedier advancement on their career trajectories when they finish, because they have exposure to top management. They have taken a more organizational view, so they come out from their individual little perspective and get to see organizational priorities, how change works in the larger organizational context. They've had to negotiate. They've had to do more questioning, more brainstorming, more soliciting of information, more networking, and those skills and capabilities are part of what breeds leadership. And so these folks are better leaders when they're finished with an X-Team experience. And so pretty soon, in one of the organizations we worked with, everybody was nominated and had to come the first year. By the third year, people had to go through a process to get into the program because others in the organization saw the positive results both for them individually and for the organization. So you want to maybe start off by getting great people to assure success of an X-Team program, and then as time goes on, people will just come. Okay. Let's go on to the next question. What do you mean by stringent structure? There's a great quote in the book in chapter 8 about one of the teams saying that when they got this checklist and this workbook when they got started, and they had all of these milestones and deadlines, one of them sort of said something along the lines of, it was like being scared of being rapped on your knuckles by your elementary school teacher, because there was this book. But at the end, that teams find that very helpful. So stringent structure is, here's what we want you to do. We want you to be externally oriented from day one. We want you to go and talk to customers. We want you to go and talk to contractors. We want you to go and talk to analysts. We want you to look at best practices in other organizations. Go and do that, and we're going to check up on you. We want you to have milestones and things deadlines for different parts of the project, because that keeps you moving. So by the end of Explore, you need to sort of understand, all right, what is the context? What are stakeholder attitudes? What is it that you have discovered? And then a couple of weeks into exploitation, what is the one thing you're going to focus on? Why are you going to focus on this? How are you going to organize yourself differently to move into exploitation? Those are stringent structure is making sure that teams follow that particular move as they move into an X-Team design. Okay. How important is common language and frame of reference for team effectiveness? Great question. I actually think that common language is one of the most important things we do for the companies that we work with, whether it's a leadership model or a team model. If there's a language of accounting, there's a language of finance, there's a language of operations and continuous improvement. All of these are languages, but we don't always have a language of how to effectively create structures and relationships and networks and effective teams and leadership. And so if everybody's talking about we're in explore mode, or everybody's talking about we're in scouting now, or we're trying to do sense making, that language is incredibly powerful because everybody knows what everybody else is talking about, and it gets people immediately into those activities. So I think you cannot underestimate the value of a common language that has everybody then oriented toward those activities and able to communicate with each other on a much higher level of understanding. Okay. Is the X team an approach that will work for a smaller company without resources to have a dedicated team? I think, in fact, that for many small companies, they are X teams. I mean, startups really are X teams. You can't be a startup that is talking to venture capitalists and funders and trying to put a customer, a product in the marketplace. So many tiny startups are X teams. I think that the challenge for small companies is once you get past that first product, and it's not just the top management team that is doing all the work, where you have to go to a second product or move to a new part of the marketplace. So you're going to have a different application or go into a different industry application. When you start expanding and growing in that way, then things start to get very disorganized. And so, in fact, X Teams is a very good vehicle to keep people focused, maybe an X team on the original product and another X team that's working and moving toward a new product or a new market. And people can be on X teams part-time. You don't have to be full-time on an X team. You can make it work even if it's a part-time venture. So, yes, I absolutely think that it can work in small companies as well. Okay. In the companies you listed, did top management lead the rollout and adoption of X Teams? I studied, as I said, X Teams. I've been studying X Teams for 20 years, over 20 years. And sometimes we have found X Teams in every company that we have ever gone into. And in every single organization, X Teams are there. And sometimes they just sprout up because people have ideas and they push like Tammy Savage. Tammy Savage is an example where top management had nothing to do with it. There was a group that felt very strongly about a need to move into a marketplace, and they made that happen. When we roll out X-Team programs, because we often do that in the Executive Ed program at the Sloan School of Management, again through the Leadership Center, typically we get top management involved because, again, in order to support these programs, in order for there absolutely to be representation from the top levels, we think that must happen. So you don't necessarily need top management to lead the rollout, but you need them supporting the initiative and engaged in the initiative and really, really clearly putting their time, effort, and energy into supporting the program. Okay. What length of projects work well with X Teams? 6 weeks, 6 years. We have them, I've seen them in many, many different ways. You can do certainly a 6-week project in X Teams. There are X Teams that have been around for a number of years. Tammy Savage and her group were around for several years to get that product from beginning through into Microsoft Messenger. In fact, some of those product ideas are still coming out. So there's a huge range. It depends on what the project is. Is the project to generate new ideas, or is the project to actually bring a product through to the marketplace. The first is much shorter, the second is much longer. So it depends what task the team has set before it, what you're asking them to do. And it looks like that is it. Wait another minute or two to see if anybody has another question, and then otherwise I think I've hopefully gotten all the ones that are down here. Great group, great set of questions, by the way.
We don't have anything coming in on the phone. In case anyone does want to ask a question before we end, it's star 1 on your telephone keypad.
Okay, looks like that's it. So I guess thank you so much. As I said, great questions. So I hope that for all of you, this has been a helpful way of thinking about organizing teams in your organization, creating new drives for innovation, and creating vehicles that will get people motivated and excited about the work that they're doing, and create new forms of leadership development. Because as I said, these teams are not just effective teams, they just help people to develop the skills that are needed in a flat world. So I wish you the best of luck and hope that you can use some of these ideas in the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much, Deborah. This concludes the audio session. I'd like to thank everyone for attending. I'd really like to thank you, Deborah, for your time and your expertise. If people could keep an eye out for that evaluation or the email that I'll be sending. And if you do end up having any follow-up questions, please feel free to send me an email, and I'll get that to Deborah. And so goodbye, and have a wonderful day. Thanks again, Deborah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.